In this message, I want to tell you about a plan you can follow which takes only a little time each day, 5 days a week, and which brings results out of all proportion to the time spent. We've covered the fact that no one ever made a purposeful accomplishment without a clear goal toward which to work. I hope you've established one and that you've begun to think about it. Press it into your mind, particularly your remarkable subconscious or superconscious mind. Now for a moment, consider the things your mind has brought you. Everything you have, your work, your relationship with your family and others, your philosophy of life, all come to you as a result of using your mind. Now consider the estimate made by experts. You've probably been operating on less than 10% of your mental capacity, and probably much less than that, according to the knowledgeable experts in such fields. In a recent article for the Saturday Review, our old friend Herbert Otto, psychologist, educator, and chairman of the National Center for the Exploration of Human Potential, reminded us that many well-known scientists, such as the late Dr. Maslow, Margaret Mead, Gardner Murphy, O. Spurgeon, English, Carl Rogers, subscribe to the hypothesis that all of us are using just a very small fraction of our capacities. Margaret Mead quotes a 6% figure. Herbert Otto writes, my own estimate is 5% or less. Neurological research has shed new light on man's potential. Work at the UCLA Brain Research Institute points to enormous abilities latent in everyone by suggesting an incredible hypothesis. They've said the ultimate creative capacity of the human brain may be, for all practical purposes, infinite. To use the computer analogy, man is a vast storehouse of data, but we've not learned how to program ourselves, usually, to utilize the data for problem-solving purposes. The following appeared in Soviet Life Today, a USSR English language magazine. Quote, the latest findings in anthropology, psychology, logic, and physiology show that the potential of the human mind is very great indeed. As soon as modern science gave us some understanding of the structure and work of the human brain, we were struck with its enormous reserve capacity, wrote Yefremov, eminent Soviet scholar and writer. He continues, men and women under average conditions of work and life use only a small part of their thinking equipment. If we were able to force our brain to work at only half its capacity, we could, he said, without any difficulty whatever, learn 40 languages, memorize the large Soviet encyclopedia from cover to cover, and complete the required courses of dozens of colleges. That's if we were able to force our brain to work at only half its capacity. This statement is hardly an exaggeration. It's the generally accepted theoretical view of our mental potentialities. Now, how can we tap this gigantic potential? Well, it's a big and complex problem with many ramifications, but as Herbert Otto pointed out, it's clear that persons who live close to their capacity, who continue to activate their potential, have a pronounced sense of well-being and considerable energy. They see themselves as leading very purposeful and creative lives. The way most people use their minds can be compared to the time back in the early 19th century when just the eastern shore of the North American continent was settled, just a little strip along the coast. To the west stretched the raw, undeveloped great bulk of what was later to become the incredibly rich 99% of the economy, 99% of the natural resources, which resulted in the standard of living enjoyed today by Americans. If everything you have now, think about this. If everything you have is the result of using just 10% of your mind, and probably far less than that, consider for a moment what it will mean to you and your family if you can increase this percentage at all. This cassette will show you how to use infinitely more of your mental powers, how to develop some of that 90% virgin territory. None of us, as a rule, has the slightest notion of the real capabilities of his or her mind. But believe me when I say that your mind can be compared to an undiscovered gold mine, and it makes no difference whether you're 17 or 70. Look at it this way. Your goal is in the future. Your problem is to bridge the gap which exists between where you are now and the goal you intend to reach. Now, this is the problem to solve. Robert Seashore, when chairman of the Department of Psychology at Northwestern University, pointed out that successful people are not people without problems. They're simply people who learn to solve their problems. There you have it. Living successfully, getting the things we want from life, is a matter of solving the problems which stand between where we now are and the point we wish to reach. No one's without problems. They're a part of living. But let me show you how much time we waste in worrying about the wrong problems. Here's a reliable estimate of the things people worry about. Things that never happen, 40%. Things over and past that can't be changed by all the worry in the world, 30%. Needless worries about our health, 12%. Petty, miscellaneous worries, 10%. Real, legitimate worries, 8%. In short, 92% of the average person's worries take up valuable time, cause painful stress, even mental anguish, and are absolutely unnecessary. And with the real, legitimate worries, there are two kinds. There are the problems we can solve, and there are the problems beyond our ability to personally solve. But most of our real problems usually fall into that first group, the ones we can solve if we'll learn how. There must be millions of people today who feel they're being barred from the life they want because they look upon problems not as challenges to be met, but as wide chasms beyond their ability to bridge. A little research proves that successful people have the same kind of problems. One of the very real benefits of working with a psychologist or psychiatrist comes from learning that there are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of other people with problems identical to our own. So the whole thing boils down to a matter not of problems, which are common to us all, but to our ability to solve them. Now, I'm going to assume you've decided on a goal. Your problem is, how do I achieve it? Your goal may be a promotion, a greater income, a beautiful home. It makes little difference what your goal happens to be. For a young person, it can be better grades in school, a diploma, a degree. For a secretary, a trip around the world. For a junior executive, a senior executive position. For the young lady secretary, maybe being president of the company someday, or a brain surgeon. But you have your goal, and you know that you will achieve what you think about. That is, if you stay with it, you will reach your goal. But how? Well, it's right here that the mind comes into play. What is the mind? Nobody knows for sure. Perhaps the best way to describe it is to quote Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Archibald MacLeish. In his play, The Secret of Freedom, a character says, "The only thing about a man that is a man is his mind. Everything else you can find in a pig or a horse." That's uncomfortably true. The human mind is the one thing that separates us from the rest of the creatures on this planet. Everything that means anything to us comes to us through our minds. Our love of our families, our beliefs, all of our talents, knowledge, abilities, everything is reflected through our mind. Anything that comes to us in the future will almost certainly come to us as a result of the extent to which we use our minds. And yet it's the last place on earth the average person turns to for help. In order to reflect just a moment on the human mind, consider what it's accomplished. As you do, of course, realize that we're developing so rapidly that we've come further in the realm of progress in the past 50 years than in all the preceding 10,000 years of human civilization. Of all the scientists who ever lived, it's estimated that 90% of them are alive today. We've reached, in the area of ideas and human advancement, a plateau so high it was undreamed of by even the most optimistic forecasters as recently as 30 years ago. But every new idea triggers additional ideas, so that now we're in an era of compounding advancement on every front and in every area that staggers the imagination. From landing on the moon, bridges which span our bays and rivers, the harnessing of the power of the sun in our atomic plants and ships, the speed of light computers which in seconds save months and years of calculating drudgery. Every man-made thing you see and touch spawned from the most powerful agency in the world, the human mind. Dr. Harlow Shapley of Harvard has said we're entering an entirely new age of mankind. He calls it the psychozoic age, the age of the mind. Now, you own one of those, free and clear. Now let's look at a few facts. The 40-hour week long standard is in imminent likelihood of being even further shortened. This means that the average working person has at his or her disposal an enormous amount of free time. In fact, if you look totally hours in a year, subtract the sleeping hours, if you sleep 8 hours every night, you'll find that the person has almost 6,000 waking hours, of which less than 2,000 are spent on the job. Now, this leaves 4,000 hours a year when we're neither working or sleeping. These might be called discretionary hours, with which, well, we can do pretty much as we want. Now, so you can see the amazing results in your life, I want to recommend that you take just 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, and devote this hour to exercising your mind. Pick 1 hour a day on which you can be fairly certain. The best time for me is an hour before the others are up in the morning. The mind is clear, the house is quiet, and if you like, with a fresh cup of coffee, this is the time to start the mind going, and here's one good way to do it. During this hour every morning, or at night, whatever your favorite time is, take a completely blank sheet of paper. At the top of the page, write your present primary goal clearly, simply. They say that a problem defined is half solved. Then, since our future depends upon the way in which we handle our work, write down as many ideas as you can for improving that which you now do. Try to think of 20 possible ways in which the activity that fills your day can be improved. You won't always get 20, but even one idea is pretty good. Now remember, 2 important points with regard to this. 1, this is not easy. And 2, most of your ideas won't be any good. Now, when I say it's not easy, I mean it's like starting any new habit. At first, you'll find your mind a little reluctant to be hauled up and out of the old familiar rut. But as you think about your work and ways in which it might be improved, write down every idea that pops into your head, no matter how absurd it might seem. Now, let me tell you what'll happen. Some of your ideas will be good and worth testing. The most important thing this extra hour accomplishes, however, is that it deeply embeds your goal into your subconscious, or what we like to call the superconscious mind. Starts the whole vital machinery working, first thing every morning. And 20 ideas a day, if you can come up with that many. Total 100 a week, even if you don't think on weekends. An hour a day, 5 days a week totals 260 hours a year. That still leaves you 3,740 hours of free leisure time. Now, this means you'll be thinking about your goal and ways of improving your performance, increasing your service, 6.5 full extra working weeks a year. 6.5 40-hour weeks devoted to thinking and planning. Can you see how easy it is to rise above the so-called competition? And it will still leave you with 15 hours a day to spend as you please. Starting each day thinking, you'll find that your mind will continue to work all day long. You'll find that at odd moments when you least expect it, really great ideas will begin to pop into your mind. Now, whenever they do, write them down as soon as you can. Just one great idea can completely revolutionize your work and, as a result, your life. If you want to develop the muscles of your body, you take daily exercise of some sort. The mind is developed in exactly the same way, except that the returns are out of all conceivable proportion to the time and energy spent. The mind of man can lift anything. His muscles, even the best developed, are puny alongside some of those of the dumbest animals on earth. If man had depended on his muscles for survival, he probably would have disappeared, as did the dinosaurs, which were incidentally the most physically powerful creatures that ever lived. Let me give you just some of the results people have reported to me as a consequence of following this 1 hour a day routine. An office equipment salesman sold more of his company's product in 1 month than he had formerly sold in an entire year during the 4 years he'd been with his company. A Sunday school teacher with 5 pupils set a goal of 30 pupils. Her last letter told us she now has a class of 25. She's almost reached her goal. I've used this system for years, and it's given me some of the most gratifying and rewarding experiences of my life. And it costs 5 hours a week. 5 hours out of 168. Is it worth it? I'll say it is. It's like spending 5 hours a week digging in a solid vein of pure gold, because your mind is all of that and much more. Each time you write your goal at the top of the sheet of paper, don't worry or become concerned about it. Think of it only as waiting to be reached, a problem only waiting to be solved. Face it with faith, and bend all the great powers of your mind towards solving it. And believe me, solve it you will. You know, this puts each of us in the driver's seat. Let me briefly recap. 1. This week, start spending 1 hour each day getting as many ideas as you can. Try for 20 a day on ways to improve what you're now doing. Remember, the achievement of your goal very likely depends upon it, as does your whole future. Once you start exercising your mind in this way, I know you'll want to continue the practice. It's fun. 2, if everything you now have is the result of using, say, 5 to 10% of your mental ability, you can imagine what life will be like if you can increase this figure to 20% or more. 3, successful people are not people without problems. They're simply people who learn to solve their problems. 4, don't waste time and energy worrying about needless things. Remember that 40% of them will never happen, 30% have already happened and can't be changed, 12% are needless worries about health, 10% are petty, miscellaneous worries, and only 8% are real. Try to separate the real from the unnecessary and solve those which are within your ability to solve. 5, the human race has advanced farther during the past 50 years than in all the preceding 10,000 years of human civilization. We're now living right in the middle of the golden age man's been dreaming of and praying for centuries, and it's very likely going to get better. Last of all, the only thing in the world that can take you to your goals in life is your mind, its effective use, and following through on the good ideas it supplies you. Each of us has a tendency to underestimate his or her own abilities. We should realize that we have deep within ourselves a reservoir of great ability, even genius, that can be tapped if we'll just dig deep enough. It's called the miracle of your mind.